Welcome to the Cabrera Lab Podcast.
Hey.
What is up?
I think that's relative. I don't know how to answer that.
That's right. I always get you with that one.
You always do that. But at this moment, the ceiling is up.
At this moment, from this perspective.
In this perspective, yes. In this seat, the ceiling and the lights are up.
The joys of autism.
There are joys of it. I agree with that.
I agree.
It's wonderful.
I love it.
Okay. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
I'm not sure. I have no idea what
This is what's fun for me.
Yep.
We've been talking a lot about profersional.
Okay.
I think we need to explain ourselves a little bit.
Profersional.
Right. So profersional is the portmanteau of professional and personal, obviously.
Yes.
I want to focus on the personal part today.
A portmanteau, by the way.
I know.
Is an RDS.
Yes.
All portmanteaus are RDSs.
That's right. You take two things.
Yep.
You relate them.
And you get
because
this whole
new thing,
system.
Yep. It's like Benefer.
Yeah, it's like Benefer. It's like different.
I want to talk about the personal part of profersional.
The personal part.
The personal part.
Okay.
The personal part. I want to talk about how systems thinking can make us better humans, how it has ethical implications, psychosocial applications,
huge. All
of these things.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people come to systems thinking through professional context because they're dealing with issues at work or they're not getting the outcomes they want in their business, or a lot of organizational leaders come to us. And I think it would be nice to step away from that for a moment and say, okay, let's say I come to systems thinking with a need to reflect on myself personally, to work on something personal, like improving my communication with others, or, feeling differently about my life or myself.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I came up with the term profersional is because it's kind of a pet peeve of mine that we make these, gross distinctions between professional and personal, like we leave ourselves at home. Sometime in the future, maybe those distinctions won't be made, because the truth is, if you work on the personal stuff, then the professional stuff will go better.
Okay, so maybe let's define what we mean by the personal stuff.
Communication,
our own selves,
relationship, self identity, intrapersonal. So there's intrapersonal, that's inside, like your relationship with yourself. There's interpersonal, like interacting with other people. There's all kinds of different dependencies, like dependence, independence, codependence, all those kinds of things. So, the personal is where it all starts. It is personal. We
take ourselves everywhere.
Yeah.
And
it's where it starts. It's where happiness and success and all of it starts at the personal. Motivation, all of it's personal.
Limits, not limits, all that.
People say it's not personal. It's definitely personal.
Everything's personal.
Everything's personal.
That's an interesting way to think about it, actually. It's interesting, actually. I'm going to think on that more. Okay, so let's...
Not like in the sense of, take everything personally,
like a pincushion. Or a porcupine.
Porcupine.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's make the connection. I think, let's just start with one thing, distinctions, right? Distinctions are the is not list, like making clear boundaries between...
Identity, other, or is not list. Yeah. So
what's the psychosocial, personal implication of that? Being able to make distinctions.
It's so deep. This is why I love studying this stuff. It goes so deep. So first of all, we talk about identity, other, right? Well, identity is everything from imagine an ID badge, or in software programming or engineering, or you have IDs for everything. Or, an atom or a molecule or a person's identity. So identity crosses the whole spectrum. An organizational identity, brand, all that kind of stuff is identity. So personally, identity is really important.
Yeah.
But it's constantly changing depending on the context we're in, right? We're somebody different when we're at Thanksgiving dinner with our family than we are when we're at the office, right? So our identity is highly dependent on the other that we're with, right? Yeah. And that's the same for color, right? If I put a color next to another, around a bunch of other colors, it's going to look different than if I change the colors that it's with.
Yes.
The color will look different, right? Depending on the colors that it's with.
Yeah.
So this is a universal reality. And one of my favorite stories is the story in the Northern Natal. The people of the Northern Natal in Africa they have a greeting. And it's kind of like, hey, how you doing? Good, pretty good, fine, except it's a little different. And the greeting goes like this. They say sawubona, and sawubona means I see you. And the reply is sakona, and sakona means therefore I exist.
Right.
Right? So this is, to me, a very beautiful interaction of identity other. It's like the identity of a person is highly dependent on the other, and vice versa. That other is its own identity, and for that identity, you're the other.
Right.
And so it's this really nice interaction that's manifested in this greeting that is part and parcel of everything.
Yeah, I mean, I also think, yes, I think the larger point about identity, one's own self, I think also a lot of human development and maturation is about setting the boundaries for yourself. Like,
yes.
Where are my ethical boundaries as I interact with this world?
Yep.
You know, how am I going to
set boundaries
for
other people
right.
to not trample on.
Right.
You know, that's huge.
Yeah.
You know, like so important that we sort of go, yeah, this is kind of where I draw the line.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Literally draw the line, draw the boundary, set boundaries. And especially with certain personality types, you have to set boundaries, right?
True.
Boundary conditions, identity, other, very important. Also, you mentioned sort of the ethical domain. When you understand and use, so both be metacognitive and practice, so mental fitness is the combination of those two things. When you understand and use distinctions, identity, other, there's a deep ethical practice to those things, which is that you don't alienate, marginalize, or not consider the other.
Right. You're actually seeing the other.
You see the other.
Yeah.
You might not agree with the other. You might not even like the other.
Right.
But you see the other.
Yeah.
Right? You recognize the other.
Yeah.
You acknowledge that the other is an identity like you. Right?
Yeah.
And has all the same identity and relationships and systems and perspectives that you have as an identity.
Yes.
And to recognize that is probably one of the most deeply ethical and pro-social acts that you can have. It's that the other is never otherized.
They're recognized but not otherized.
The other is recognized. Yes, they're an other to you, but they are their own identity. Just like you're an identity and you're the other to them, they are an identity. They have a perspective. Again, this doesn't mean you have to agree with them.
Right.
It just means that you acknowledge them. You acknowledge the difference. You acknowledge their identity. You acknowledge their perspective. You might think their perspective is stupid. Maybe you should think more about that or whatever. But it's not saying you agree with them. It's just acknowledging them, that they exist. They have a right to exist, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but that's a nice segue into perspectives, right? So perspectives, we've talked a lot about, are the core foundational skill to empathy, compassion. So, you get to the point where it's not just about the identity and other, it's about the perspective that creates other and identity and that has that interchangeability. Yeah,
and there's this beautiful thing, which is you have this identity and you have this other, and the distinction. The distinction is actually the boundary between them, right? And then you just layered on that you have perspective. So this thing has a point, and this thing is the view, and this thing is a point, and this thing is the view, right? So that's these things make perspective. But what's really important is just think of the number of people personally that conflate their identity with their point of view, with their perspective.
Yeah.
Right? That these two things are equal. They're not equal. Your identity is not your perspective.
Right.
right? You can change, and that's why people are unwilling to change their perspective.
Because it's
tied to their identity. Yeah. So in DSRP, when we see that, the perspective point that we're looking from is not necessarily, and what we see in the view is not the same as the identity. It's influencing the identity. Right. It's part of the identity, but it's not the whole thing.
Right, but that makes the argument for separating them.
Yes.
Right, for keeping, there's my identity and there's my perspective.
Yes.
And those two things, if they're conflated, are why we get into problems.
Well, it's one way we get into problems a lot. Ways, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or not seeing that you even have a perspective. So to me, these are just variables that you need to account for. You need to account for the point and view variables of your perspective, so that you can see that they're not quite the same as your identity and other variables and things like that.
Yeah, but the other thing you said was it's not just about recognizing my perspective, but recognizing every other has its own perspective. Yeah. Which to me, you can't have empathy or compassion without being able to take another's perspective.
Right. Yeah, I mean, people talk about empathy and compassion as being so important, and they are. There's no doubt these are massively important things, probably some of the most important things for pro-social behavior, for society, for relationships, all kinds of things, communication. But what they often miss is that you don't get either of those things without perspective. Perspective underlies these things. If you can't take perspective, then you're not going to have empathy and compassion.
No, it's not possible.
Not possible.
No. So we've talked also about interpersonal communication as one of the areas of application of DSRP. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that comes to play not just in being, having compassion for others by taking other perspectives, but also in changing the way that you actually communicate.
Totally.
I guess intrapersonally too,
totally,
and also interpersonally, and that comes more in the relationship realm. This episode is brought to you by STSI, the Systems Thinking Standards Institute.
Yes, super excited to work with STSI, raising the standard for 8 billion systems thinkers, science-based standards, training, the professional systems thinking credential, accreditation for organizations, the systems thinking or thinker toolkit. And so I really encourage folks to go to stsi.pro, take the trainings, get the credentials, get your organization accredited, get the toolkit. Yeah. It's good stuff.
Help us get to 8 billion.
And it's a 501c3 nonprofit.
Don't forget that.
It's a great partner. That's right. So when we get to relationships, there's interpersonal, and then there's intrapersonal. Well, you can take the intrapersonal and just expand it, and it looks the same, right? There's you, and then there's your internal you, or whatever you want to call your internal you. But you're relating to yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And so both of these are barbells, barbell move, and what we want to do is obviously the other patterns of thinking, D and S and P, will help you understand this thing and help you understand this thing. But then we want to understand how are they relating. And that's where you have action and reaction and action and reaction. And so you get this loop, what I call the quadratic, because it's 4. So, you have this constant thing going on between action, reaction, reaction.
Person A acts.
Yep.
Person B
has a reaction.
Yep. Then person B can have an action which causes or leads to a reaction.
Yep.
So how does let's talk through how awareness of this can improve
just
how you interact with people.
Rather than just seeing it like this, which is just a very general relationship, you start to see some of the detail of the action and the reaction and the action and the reaction, and then you can do something really remarkable because, again, DSRP says we can relate things, and these are things. So we can relate this thing and this thing, which means that now this is happening internal, which means your reaction doesn't have to be your action. Now, for a lot of people, their reaction and their action end up being the same thing.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be. And if we can distinguish between them and relate them, we can say, actually, we can put in a thing right here in the relationship, which is metacognition or awareness, and ask yourself, hey, that's my reaction, but how much of that is me versus them? Some of that might be for me. I don't want to project my own stuff on other people, so my action's going to be really different than what my reaction was. And I internally process, and I can end up doing this very fast, because a lot of times interpersonal communication and relationships happens real fast. If you practice, this is called an RDS. All of this is RDS barbell. So RDS barbell is just the barbell plus the relationship, distinguishing the relationship, and then looking at the parts. Well, now we're looking at the parts. So this is called RDS barbell.
Right. So so I'm person B.
Yep.
A says or does something. I have in my mind, I have a reaction.
Yeah, and
there's a moment where I can actually, you're saying, be aware that I am reacting, think about it in this moment, and then choose
so give me an example,
react.
like say something to me.
Your hair looks silly.
My hair looks silly. So let's say that I've had some bad experience in my life with somebody making fun of me or making fun of my hair or, whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Or some baggage that I have. Well, when you say your hair looks silly, I don't know I don't actually know the reality of what your intentions are. Are you trying to be mean? Are you trying to be playful? Are you trying, obviously I know you, so I know you, but I could maybe make some
assumptions,
intuitions about what you mean, and I can then ask you questions. But maybe I have some baggage around that, and so I go, oh my God, how could you say that to me? That's so disrespectful, so mean, and I get angry, and then I say, blah, 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 blah. And then you say, and then you get angry at what I said, and then we're in this thing, right?
Yeah.
Or I could be like, well, I have no idea what her intentions were in saying that, so why would I even react yet?
Right.
Right? Because I don't know what that was about. And I could say, then I could change my action to, are you trying to be mean?
Right.
Genuine question, right?
Yeah.
And you go, oh, no, I wasn't trying to be mean. I was making a joke, or I was providing an example. I was playing with, my hair, does it look weird? And you go, well, it's got some stuff. Oh, okay, I'll fix that.
Right.
Right? I mean, we're on a podcast maybe, and you don't want me to look stupid in front of people or something like that, right? So
yeah.
And I have something like sticking out or whatever. So you could have meant that statement could have so many different meanings. So I don't want to prematurely react without understanding that maybe some of this is dragging in baggage. So there's baggage out here that's being drug into this.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. If I am aware, I cannot do that. Maybe there's the question, a lot of questions that come up in this relationship. Like, I don't know if she's serious. I don't know if she's trying to be mean. So I could say, hey, are you trying to be mean? And then you might say, yeah, actually, I was trying to be mean. And then my reaction would be like, oh, well, that says more about you than it says about my hair.
And
right?
I'm going to feel that.
Right? So what I'm saying is, when you see this and when you see it very fast, you're able to distinguish between your reaction and your action. And here's the part that's really amazing, and I hope people hear this. When you do this, it isn't just more ethical and more fair and better communication and all the positives that come from that. It gives you more agency, which is like the most incredible thing in life, because it's freedom. Agency is freedom. Right. Personal freedom.
Yeah.
When you are not beholden to your reactions, you free up, you liberate yourself to actions, to agency of your own choosing.
Meaning you're not flying off the wheel.
You're not flying off the handle.
You're in that moment, you're taking a metacognitive pause, and you're going to figure out the situation before you have a reaction.
Yes, and with practice, like we talked about in the last episode, that metacognitive pause can be almost instantaneous.
Yeah, like that.
You can be really good at this. And it can happen as fast as conversation is happening.
Right.
And you can literally get to the point where you choose the action rather than not choosing the reaction.
Yes.
And that gives you agency, which gives you freedom, which has this like feedback loop of positivity where you feel good.
Yeah.
You feel free. You feel agency.
Well, and you feel like you're in control.
And you feel like you have control.
Yeah.
And when you feel like you have control, you know, a lot of people do silly things because they feel out of control. Well, when you feel like you have agency and control, you do less silly things. You say less silly things. You know, it's just a nicer place to be.
Yes.
So,
well, that's an honest place to be.
Being able to zoom into the action reaction of this loop, and also, by the way, you're able to see what's happening on this side because you know what's happening on this side, and it's happening for every human.
Yes.
So it makes you more empathic and more sympathetic, more compassionate for what this person's going through. Because, for example, you know, oh, geez, isn't that unfortunate? Their reaction is almost always their action because they don't have this ability.
Right.
You know, so I completely understand why they would, you know, do what they just did.
Yeah.
Because they don't, there's a direct line. This becomes this, no matter what. No choice.
Yes. And that moment between reaction and action happens nicely both in the inter and the intrapersonal space, which is why relationships, seeing them is important.
So again, people try to separate these out, but they're inseparable because, as you just saw, being good at R makes you good at P, right? Being good at relationships and seeing the system of the relationship, which is S, and making the distinctions of these variables, which is D, helps you be more compassionate and empathic and sympathetic because you're able to see that that's happening on the other person.
Yes.
And so therefore it helps you to, you know, because you're able to take that perspective, you have all these pro-social, interpersonal skills, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, well, you just talked about systems. I mean, if you think about systems sort of in this pro-social, psychosocial realm, a lot of the idea about systems is seeing yourself as part of something larger.
Yes.
Being connected to the wider universe. You know, like, there's no, you know, like, one of the things when you have teenagers, you're constantly saying, well, you're part of this family system.
Yes.
So you need to take the trash out to help.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
which they don't always see.
Right. That's what I'm saying is you have to actually build that awareness of your, I mean, you want the sense of belonging with a group, but then you also have to see that there's other nuances to being part of that ecosystem or that larger system.
And as a parent, for example, you see like a teenager, 16, 17, 18, whatever that range, depends on the kid, but you go, you know, why are they being so self-centered? Why are they not seeing the wider picture? Well, because they're moving from a stage of almost total dependence to the beginnings of independence.
Yeah.
Right? And in that independence, it takes so much effort for them to be able to be in that stage that they almost have to become more self-centered.
Right, meaning they sort of break that connection.
Yes, they have to be more self-centered to exist in this new mysterious world of semi-independence before they... And the reason they're wanting to be in that there's all kinds of reasons, but part of it is they see the future of, like, there's a future where I actually have to be independent for real, like for real independence, IRL independence, right? Yeah. And they're afraid of that. You know, it's kind of scary. So they're trying to move into that world. Well, they're working hard to move into that world.
Yeah.
And you can see that. And you can see, oh, you know, this isn't out of disrespect.
No,
this
it's just
evolutionary.
It's development, human development, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like you said, the S rule, systems rule, I always think of it as, from an ethical or pro-social perspective, as no man is an island. The old saying, no man is an island. I think sometimes there are so many great things about the U.S. culture and the Constitution and all those things. But I do think that one of the things that it does is it focuses only on individual agency. Our culture tends to be more focused on individual agency.
That's right.
And if you have part whole, it just makes you realize, there's tremendous agency. You have so much agency. But it's an and both, because you also benefit from being in the system.
Yes.
Right? And
yes.
And so there's this constant connection between the parts and other parts, and between the part and the whole and the part.
Right.
And that's what S says, basically.
Yes.
And so from an ethical perspective, always understanding that is really important. I remember a bunch of years ago, and it's played out. I hear it every once in a while, but I think it was during Obama or something like that. There was this thing about, like, do executives, wealthy executives do it on their own, or is it dependent on
the great man theory and all of
the
that?
system? Yeah. And it was like there was this debate.
Yeah, I remember that.
As if it's a debate. I mean, like, of course you can take some credit for the agency that you did to get there, but also, like, every business in every country benefits from the roads. They benefit from the schools.
That's right.
They benefit from the other parts of the system, and therefore they should give back to that system.
Right.
Right. I don't think there's really any debate about that. Right. Like your workforce that you pay.
Yeah.
To come to work. They come to work on roads that are funded by the taxpayer.
Right.
They come to work on commuting systems that are funded by the taxpayer or funded by the collective, right? Mm-hmm. So I just don't understand when we get into these situations where it's like either or, it's almost always and both.
Yeah, but it's also it's how we're trained, it's how we're raised.
It's binary.
And everybody wants to take credit for everything they've ever done, because that's sort of how our society.
That's right.
It's like this race to the top kind of thing, meritocracy.
Well, we want to take credit and we want to give blame. And in a world where there's just tons of webs of causality, this is not a popular idea, but imagine seeing a world where there's no credit and no blame.
Yeah.
Where there's just systems, and there's understanding systems, and there's wanting to make systems better. And there's loving reality. Mm-hmm. And if you want to love reality, understand systems, and understand that while there is agency, there is also emergence.
Yes.
If you want to fix the system, if you want to make the system better for yourself and for others, then it takes both. It's an and both. It's the genius of both and, rather than the tyranny of either or, as they say.
Well, it would change a lot of things.
It would change a ton of things if we just thought in that one single way.
Income stratification to the degree that there is. There'd just be.
And I'm not talking about communism. I'm not talking about socialism. I'm like a dyed-in-the-wool American. I love America, but I'm saying we could. It's an and both. It's a both and solution, where we look at individual agency is super important. In complexity science, we talk about agents. The reason we call them agents is because of agency.
Right.
Agency is so important. It's so important, and it's almost always, discredited by one side. Yeah. But we also talk about emergence, the emergence of the collective together. Mm-hmm. And that's often ignored from the other side. And it's just like, why do we do this? It's just unscientific, and it's unreality. It's not loving reality. And it doesn't make any sense. It's just this weird binary logic.
Well, at the most basic level, we would stop blaming people or groups of people, and we would start looking at the systems that are creating the issues that we're dealing with. And it would change those dynamics, especially in politics. Totally. Things like that.
It would change our politics completely, because it's ethical. Mm-hmm. It's deeply ethical at a structural level to just be like, both are important. Mm-hmm. They're both important. Yeah. Agency and emergence, or whatever you want to call it, collective, whatever, the group. and the agent
Yeah.
are both important.
I think the last point I think we should make, being in the domain of the arsenal,
Yeah.
is remind people that everything that you've seen structurally applies to the professional. Like there's action
Completely.
reaction inside of
100%.
professional
Yeah.
situations. There's identity other inside of
Totally.
workplace issues. I just wanted to make sure that we highlighted some specific applications and examples, because so many people are like, well, what is the arsenal really?
Yeah, I mean, the RDS Barbell that we talked about, which is just one of the 6 moves that are the most important moves. There's a version of this thing that we showed, this relationship here with the action, reaction, and all that, where the only way you're going to get rid of silos in organizations is using RDS Barbell.
That's right.
So these things, that's why I say it's professional, because it's like, well, this is a silly distinction that we make. The reality's structured the same way. Reality doesn't like go, oh, it's work time, we're going to change the structure of reality.
Yeah.
It's structured the same way, and our thinking's structured the same way, in both places.
Yeah.
And so I think the other point I would just make here is we kind of went in depth, and so if you're new, all we're talking about here is 6 mental moves.
Yeah.
Everything that I shared is DSRP and the 6 mental moves that we know are the most important things to practice.
Yes.
And so that's is not list, zoom in, zoom out, RDS Barbell, part party, P circle.
Yeah.
And you can learn those at, online. You can learn them in books. You can learn them wherever, online at stsi.pro or whatever.
And you can apply them to anything that you're thinking about professionally or personally.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the point, is these structures are content agnostic, context agnostic. They can be applied everywhere.
Yeah.
All right, that's what I wanted. I wanted to talk about the arsenal.
The arsenal, yeah. It's really an amazing thing how powerful it is on the personal level.
I think so.
I mean, it's transformative and it's liberating.
Yeah.
I would say those are the 2 words, transformative and liberating. It liberates you to have tremendous agency in a world that is very dynamic, very complex, and where you don't have agency over everything, but it gives you the maximum agency you can have in systems.
Yes.
And it is transformative in that it sort of makes you more in alignment with reality and more forgiving of self and all kinds of things. So,
which is a wonderful thing.
Which is a nice thing.
Yes.
And I think it's something that a lot of folks need right now.
I think that's right.
All right. I think that's a wrap.